National anthem. Please stand for the national anthem of Barbados. Thank you. Please be seated. Again, I want to wish you a very good evening and welcome to what I can guarantee you will be a wonderful couple of hours spent not only tracing but celebrating the history and achievements of the Barbados Labour Party over a specific period of time. This event is also being carried live via video stream, so I want to wish a very good evening to all of those joining us via the video stream. And I would also like at this time to indicate that throughout the course of the evening, Mr. Ezra Aline, who has just entered, will be joining us. You will forgive us if, as a video event, we give some technical directions throughout the course of the evening. So right now I'll ask Mr. Ezra Aline to please make his way over to the technical spot so that he can be mic'd. But we want to take you back to that golden era governed by the team called the Great Combination. We want you, throughout the course of the evening, to draw parallels between then and now. And as members of the Barbados Labour Party, we want you to remember with pride and honour that golden time, all of those pillars that were erected, all of those planks and platforms that were established upon which the current team of the Barbados Labour Party will rest and, of course, draw support and information. And therefore, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first set of interviewees, although I wonder if I should introduce them, that the faces are so familiar. But to my immediate right is Sir Henry Forde. Beside him is Dame Billie Miller. Beside her is Sir David Simmons. And beside him is Delisle Bradshaw. We also have with us, and joining us throughout the course of the evening, I see here Mr. Aaron Truss. We are expecting Mr. Vic Johnson, Mr. O'Brien Trotman, and Mr. Clyde Griffith. I've been asked to extend sincere apologies for Sir Richard Cheltenham, and hopefully before the end of the evening, we expect to be joined by Sir Louis Tull. So I'll just wait for a couple of quick seconds while those who've just entered take their seats as quickly as possible. And again, thank you for coming. And then I want to take you back to 1976, ladies and gentlemen. 1976. Two by-elections, one in St. Philip North that gave us David Simmons, now Sir David, and one in the city of Bridgetown that gave us Billie Miller, now Dame Billie Miller. And then a general election in September of 1976, won by the Barbados Labour Party, 17 out of 24 seats. Now, I will not be directing a question to any specific person, but I want to throw this out. Leading up to 1976, the 1976 election, the budget debate of 1976. Sir David, let's start there. The microphones are before you. All you have to do is pick them up and let us start the story. The budget debate, Sir David, of 1976. All you have to do is speak into it. It's already on. Yes.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? In the back? In the pit? All around. Well, good evening all. And Carol, Ezra, Mia, all the candidates that I see assembled here, and supporters and stalwarts of the party. Let me begin first by putting my position clearly. Not going back to 1976, going back to October 2001, after I had received a letter appointing me as Chief Justice from the Governor General. I thought it was the decent thing to resign from the Barbados Labour Party. I signed a letter to the party indicating my resignation because I was going to take up a position that required me to be absolutely impartial. And ever since then, I have not rejoined the party. That does not mean that I forget that I was a member of the Labour Party in 1957. I joined while I was at Lodge School. So from 57 to 2001, I was officially a member. Now, in 1976, that's to be seen against the background of what was happening in Barbados prior to 1976. There was an oil crisis that hit Barbados around 1972-73, and we were in deep, deep trouble. The Democratic Labour Party had no answer to the crisis. In fact, Branford Tate's answer was to go on television and ask people to share a shower and do some carpooling. You all remember? And a special pump to get gas was set up down by below Holborn, below motor services. That's the privilege pump. In the commercial sector, about 400 small shops in Barbados were closed. Unemployment was about 25%. And we had a by-election in St. Philip North, 26th of February. And I turned around, I put it in Harold Hoyt's language, created a Caribbean record of getting a swing against a government of 38%. That is where it came from. In 1971, Neville Maxwell water line. I got 683 votes and he got well over 2,000. And Fred Gollop was my campaign manager. When my numbers got to 636, Fred Gollop shouted out, "We got it!" Anybody would have thought that he won the election. In fact, that was the point where he saved my deposit. So anyhow, we we went into this election, by-election, Mr. Barrow, I think, unwisely called the election in the city in May. Billie won that on 12th of May. And there was therefore momentum for the Barbados Labour Party going into the general election on the 2nd of September. You know, I remember when I won the by-election, the night I won the by-election, Tom was so hyper. He said, David, we win the general election. If you can do this, we will win the general election. But coming up to the general election, Mr. Barr had no more cards to play. The tradition was that when the budget was delivered by the Minister of Finance, the leader of the opposition, or who was the spokesman for the opposition of finance, would respond the next day at the same time, 4 o'clock, as we're accustomed to know.
Correct.
And that budget was August. I think, I can't remember the date, like the 4th or the 5th, and it was early August. And Tom summoned a meeting of the Parliamentary Party. Now, Parliamentary Party then consisted of Tom, Bree had lost his seat in 1971, Henry, Billie, myself, Bolden, Craig, and Burton Hines. You got anybody? That's it, right? And we were in the West Wing of Parliament. Let us say the meeting was 5 o'clock. Tom didn't spend money foolishly. Whatever he had, he kept for a long time. And he had an old brown bag. Here you might remember it. An old beat up brown bag he used to walk. And he came to the meeting, and we didn't know where we were called. And he said, you know, colleagues, I have to tell you that tomorrow Mr. Barry is going to try to make me look foolish. He's going to ask me to respond as soon as he sits down. He's not going to give me the day to prepare. He said, but I have to tell you, you know, and trust me. And you know when Tom said, trust me. And trust me. I will be prepared. See this bag here? I have some things in here. I'm not telling you all what it is, but I call this meeting to ask you all whether you think that I should disclose them tomorrow or when you call the election. Well, of course not. Curiosity has captured all of us. And we say, we go in there, what Tom got in there? And Tom refused to tell us. He said, believe me, I will know what to do. The whole country will see certain things, and a signal will be given to Art at the appropriate time to zoom in, meaning Art tapping from CBC. So we said, but Thomas, we got in there. He said, no mind. You always see the contents tomorrow. We never knew. He never told anybody what he had in his bag. I believe Billie may have brought them from New York. She may have. Right. But she did not know what they were. None of it.
A package and told, give this to Craig. He will know what to do.
Well, of course, then, the next day, budget is called, and as soon as Mr. Barr sat down, Tom got up and started to be. It had 33 minutes, as I recall it. And in that time, Tom was able to talk about the banking sector and the commercial sector. Now, you know, Mr. Speaker, there's a bank called the Aline Mercantile Bank. And he exposed the checks that Sidney Anning had given to Tammy Tudor, George Moore, and so on. And the election was over, done that night, because thousands of copies of those checks were distributed all over Barbados. In Harold Hoyt's book, Eyewitness to Order and Disorder, there are copies of them there. Well, that is what happened, as I recall it. Billy, tell any lies?
Dame Billy,
Except to say,
your microphone.
sorry, except to say that I dutifully, the following Tuesday after I got back, handed them to Pride. And he opened the package, and all this stuff fell out. And Tom did like this, shut it down. And he knew instantly what it was about and what he could do with it. And I never saw them after that.
Election night, 1976. So Henry, I'm going to ask you to pick your microphone up as well, because I want to go back and forth with your memories of election night 1976. New government, a Barbados Labour Party government, led by Tom Adams.
We had to save Barbados. That's all I would say. My memory tells me that some of the conditions which we see now were present then. And it was a task of young people, and we had to bring in at least one of our senior Labour Party people, Ronald Mapp, as a minister. That's a period that they describe as a period of the great combination. There was Sir Harold, Tom, Louis Tull, Billie Miller, Sir Ronald Mapp, David, Lionel Craig, Brafford, Henry Brafford, and Louis Tull. I mentioned Louis. The Dems were saying that we didn't have the experience, but we had the knowledge and we had the devotion, which I see in this party. One of the great things about the Labour Party is that we have always been able to, when the task is given to us, to work hard for the people and to achieve the objectives of a good democracy. This is the first political party. I don't know anybody should have any doubt about what it has achieved. Our achievements have been large. And I think we sometimes do not remind people of where we came from and where we have reached. We had a very good civil service as well at the time. People who had not gone through the period of free education, as they call it, but who were up to scratch with anything that we have today in Barbados. And I think the party should be proud that we have survived for over 80 years now, done excellent work. Whether we look at the back of me to the Deepwater Harbor, that was a project of Grantley Adams. The hospital, I hear so much talk about the hospital, and the Dems thought, the hospital, what they did at the hospital, they finished the job, because, put on the roof, because Billie Miller's father would be on the spot every day. He was Minister of Health at the time. So I heard them talk about free secondary education, but at our 50th anniversary, when we looked into the manifestos at that time, Sir Hugh Springer had been the person who had, in the 1940s, written about trying to introduce free education. I know how you couldn't introduce free education until you had the places in the schools built. So we have to remind people that Grantley Adams started by building the schools. So by the time the Dems were able to win an election against us, they had the framework there. And this is one of the things about the Labour Party. We work and we made sure that we can achieve our project. I'm so happy to see so many young people now who have come to the fore. I came to the fore not without some pressure. I was an under 40 because I believed firmly in trying out another Caribbean federation. And that's how Bree and myself and a whole host of us would go talking on the under 40s. But Sir David Simmons and Bree St. John took me down to St. Vincent to do a case. And every evening when I came out of the court with them, I would hear Bree say, "Man, Henry Forde, when are you going to join the party, man?" And David Simmons quietly saying, "Oh, leave it to me. Oh, leave it to me." And I would tell you that eventually I said, when I go back, and that's when I came into the Labour Party. It wasn't because of any other reason than I thought that this was the greatest party to help the people of our country. And we have done it. We are grateful to the people that gave us the opportunity. I firmly believe now that we are at the stage that people will again look towards us. And you know my weakness. My weakness is women. It is time that we have a woman as the Prime Minister.
Can I say a few words?
Of course,
76?
of course.
As a woman, it was the time when the women's movement from the early 70s, and it was coming up to crescendo at that time. And there was in place in Barbados a commission to look into the status of women, headed by a woman, Monica Norma Forde.
Yes.
And it needs to be called after all these years, the Forde Commission. It was powerful. It was powerful.
We set it up, so that's why it should also be
Yes,
Forde.
it was powerful. But it was like, as the only woman sitting in the House at the time and in the cabinet of Barbados, it was like the wind at my back, and it made a vast difference to me in particular. But to us in general, this Henry Forde, who is being so modest tonight, he was a powerful Attorney General. He could work. The legislation was coming down the pike. The first thing he did, he outlawed bastardy. I said, "Henry, you're dealing with the children before you deal with the moms." He says, "That's coming." And then the Family Law Act came. That was something that just drove Barbadians wild. That now, what we are pleased to call unions other than marriage, and I like to refer to it like that. Everywhere I traveled in the world, people were amazed when he spoke about this. So that the Family Law Act just blew people away. And it gave women, it's like the wind that we needed, because we have a lot of powerful women who worked under the radar in the Labour Party all the years, and we know who they are, the Chethel Rocks of this world, the Miss Carrolls of this world, and so many others. But that was important. But in that 76 time, perhaps, I think, for me, after adult suffrage in 1951, the biggest, most important piece of social legislation was the freehold tenantries legislation. And I remember, because I was in the city, saying to Tom Adams, "Don't let people forget their urban tenantries too." All of Chapman Lane was a big tenantry. All of the New Orleans was a big tenantry. All of them were tenantries. The late Clark Stremmett, working at carrying concealed in those days, he was the one who collected. And then it came to a place where people just, things were so bad, didn't have the money, but they were still there. And I lived to see a particular old man I can visualize him. His knees would not allow him to stoop down. So he lay down on the ground and he kissed the ground. He said, I never thought in my lifetime I would live to own a piece of land. So for me, after adult suffrage, that was the most far-reaching piece of social legislation in Barbados.
A question for you, then, Billie. How did you make space for yourself in a cabinet where you were the lone female?
It wasn't that difficult. These were the men with whom I sat at the bar table.
Okay.
So there was nothing new about it. And in the cabinet, you gave and you took. I mean, I was no little dolly. I'm saying that because when I first started to practice law in Barbados, first Monday morning in 1969, about a year later, it was just an ordinary Barbadian man came in to see me. Secretary came in and, go through the door. He stood up there. He said, and he looked back at the door like 2 or 3 times. He said, you're the lawyer? I said, yes, I am. Have a seat. He said, but you look like a little dolly. Those were the days of Slim. Those were the days of Slim. He said, but you look like a dolly. That big tear, are you sure? So that's why I'm saying there was no dolly. But it was free and easy. I don't remember any tensions about it. But I just hoped that more women would come to sit. It was 19 years sitting in that parliament before I saw Mia Motley and Elizabeth Thompson walk up the steps and come in. And then Cynthia came. And there were 4 of us.
Now, another question. We looked at the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act. We looked at the Children's Act that outlawed the notion of illegitimate children, and we looked at the Commission on the Status of Women. Now, and you said that Sir Henry was just churning out the legislation.
The order paper was always full.
I also want to...
Legislative indigestion.
Along with the acts and the reformation and upliftment at that level, making a difference in people's lives on a day-to-day basis, going about way outside of the election, meeting people, having your clinics, and just answering their needs. Let's look at that during that time.
Before we get to that, let me just say that we have had perhaps the strongest law reform periods in Barbados when the Labour Party is in office. Mm-hmm. We've been fortunate to have people of the caliber of Sir David Simmons, Sir Louis Tull, the next Prime Minister of Barbados, Miss Mia Motley, and well, I was there as one of the team. But it is significant that if you go through the statute books of Barbados, you will see that we were reforming the laws. We were getting rid of old colonial laws that had no real meaning for us. And I really, if there's one thing I can say, is that every time now that in my old age I look back at the law books, I am so happy to have been a member of the Labour Party and to have been given the task of helping to set that example. And I'm absolutely certain, looking at our candidates, that I think that the hardest task you're going to have, Mia, is you have a lot of people who could be attorneys general. So you're going to have a pretty tough task to do when it comes to making your choice. But we have enough. You asked me.
Yes. The general panel, and this is where I'm going to bring in Ezra Aline, who has joined us, and Delisle Bradshaw.
Okay.
You can go first.
You want to know?
Making a difference in people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So we've made great advancements in the social structure with the legislation, but now getting down to the day-to-day meaning of people's lives.
Well, I think the economy was in some problems, and one of the things that we had to do was to set right the country and to take the decisions that had to be taken. And if anybody knows what a task it was, because we were mostly inexperienced in governing at the time. We brought in Sir Ronald Mack, and we were fortunate to have, as I said, a very top-class civil service. And we were able, therefore, to have a plan. And Tom Adams always has something up his sleeve, as you know. And when you see Tom Adams in cabinet, he would have a newspaper from England. He'd be doing the crosswords. And he would say, Henry, you hear what Bernard said? You agree with that? And then he would turn to Brathwaite and said, Brathwaite, what about the roads you were to fix down in St. Thomas? I didn't see any yet coming out for me. So that was a Tom Adams do. And Cynthia would tell you, because Cynthia was one of his biggest canvassers, Tom Adams knew how to make little go far. The other thing is that we all were able to help each other as ministers of government, because we realized our task and our commitment had to be putting Barbados back on the right track. Mia, that is going to be one of the challenges that you have, but I know that you're competent enough to be able to answer it as good, if not better than Tom did. And then our group, and with the candidates whom you have before you, I think Barbados will recognize that we are bringing people who have tremendous dedication to helping those who may not be as well off as some of the others at the top. The party has always been committed to raising people's living standards, to making sure that we have good health facilities. As I said, I talked about Billie's father actually dealing with the hospital, to make sure that we had in place the schools so that we can help children. And you couldn't do it only in a year, as the Democratic Labour people make people believe that this is what happened. There had to be time to build the schools, and we built 4 or 5 schools before the Dems won an election here. So we looked after the people. Mm-hmm. And I have no doubt that we are going to continue to look after the people and try to see that we can get back our beautiful country where Barbados was before.
Couple of interesting things. I think we won the elections in 1806. 1806. And in framing the manifesto, there were a number of things that we committed to. I better tell the story, because these things get lost and distorted. The papers for that manifesto were given to Henry Colin Williams, who was not a judge but a solicitor, lawyer at the time, and myself around your dining table in the Pioneer family wrote that manifesto. And one of the things that we committed to was to involve backbenchers in governance. And we committed that if we won the election, backbenchers would be asked to head statutory boards. I was very glad, to tell the truth, because I was only in practice at that time, 6 years. I hadn't built a financial foundation for myself and my family. To have gone into cabinet, I would probably still be in Dodds now. It would have broken me and it would have locked me up or made me bankrupt. I'm not joking. The first salary check that Henry got as a minister and Bree, they brought down to the chambers, Jewish chambers, Henry's chambers at the corner of Lucas Street and James Street, and showed me and a couple others. $1,800 as a minister. That's the kind of money that we were working for in those days. So when Tom formed the government, he said to some of us, look, build your practices, secure your foundations. What I'm going to do, David, you go to National Housing. Ezra went to CBC. Johnny to the IDC. And we learned about government in a practical way, heading these statutory boards. So those of us remained on the back bench, but we were still close to what was happening by virtue of our chairmanship of these boards. The other thing that we committed to that is perhaps forgotten is that we were determined to restructure the economy of Barbados. And in 1979, again, Henry produced a raft of legislation to lay the legislative infrastructure for the offshore financial sector. And that provoked out of Richie Haynes the greatest possible opposition. All kinds of drug lords and counterfeit artists and so on would be brought into Barbados. And we had a hell of a time selling the offshore financial sector. See where it is today? Mentor predicted that it would employ 2,400 people. He was right, you know. It has employed more than that. So that the Labour Party has always had a vision, a larger vision for Barbados than perhaps the average person appreciates. In those days we were able, you talk about connecting the people, build a massive amount of houses. You had at the National Housing Corporation, direct labor, the Housing Corporation actually built houses. You had a staff of workers. And I left there in
Parliamentary.
79, I think it was. I went to CBC, I swapped with Ezra. He came to housing. But in those first 5 years connecting to the people, we built the houses in Watton, Ferniehurst, what's the other one? Everybody Ferniehurst? Rosemont. Extended houses in Oxnard and West Terrace, at Redlands Village, Kensington Lodge, in the city. The party has always been action-oriented, and we have been a party of doers, and I have been proud to be associated with such a party when I was in Parliament.
Hey, Brady, can you give me 1 minute to say Kensington Lodge was not built out of monies from the Barbados Consolidated Fund. I remember in 1977, Tom Adams went on the television and he told the people of Barbados that he had looked very carefully, he and Henry and St. John, and we had, as he said, good civil servants, people like Steve Emptage and Miss Griffith were there already. And he asked the people of Barbados to pull in their belts a notch. Give us some time. Pull in your belt a notch. A few mornings after that, I was driving to work, coming up Baxter's Road. The beauty of being in the city means that I saw my constituents every day. I would take a different route in. And a woman was standing up outside the Pink Star on the pavement. She shouted to another woman. Traffic was backed up, so I heard the conversation. You hear what Tom Adams said on the TV last night? You got to pull in your belt a notch. And this woman on the other side So around you, I put in my 2 notches. And the next cabinet day, I said to Tom Adams, your message has gone home. Your message has gone home. And I'm saying that particularly to you, Mia. Fear not. Once the people of Barbados understand, and we explained it like David said, they will stay with you.
Thank you. Delisle. I want to stay on the ground, and I want to come out of 76 now and approach 81 and that election. And whenever you talk about fierce campaigners on the ground, your name is among the first to be called. So let us look now at campaigns on the ground, canvassing, pulling out people, getting out the vote, getting the message across.
Good night to each and every one of you. Now, I am somewhat a strange political character, and I mean that. I was in the Huskins with Henry Forde. In fact, going back to Mayor Motley's father's by-election campaign in the late 60s, and then in the 70s in St. Joseph. I was a teacher then. I had a school, and I was able to reach and touch the people. Henry would tell you, I brought him to my school and introduced him. I used the school. I did it with Tom Adams as well. I understood at an early age what politics meant. Expose your leaders, and that paid dividends. But going on, I have held more ministries than Billy, Sir Henry, Sir David, or anybody else. I was referred to as a utilities man. I acted in 9 out of 11 ministries, except the Attorney General and Minister of Finance. Now, that is where I gained my experience. At one time, Tom gave me 4 ministries to handle, acting in 4 different ministries. You understand what that meant? I would go from ministry to ministry, and I was the only person who was a parliamentary secretary to 2 ministers. Breeze St. John and Ronald Mapp. One in housing, one in trade, industry, civil aviation, and tourism. So it was creative. It was creative. And I learned, I acted more times than anybody else, and I was always up at Government House. The Governor General used to refer to me as a resident. Every 5 minutes, Henry, the boys going out to ask me to act. In 1981, fast forward. In 1976, I won. By 1978, my good friend Pele Parish died, and hell broke out in Barbados. Eric Seeley, the worst thing ever created. He had a tongue, I tell you, and he made everybody smell hell. Wherever he went, he had large crowds. Said anything. Cursed Sir David, cursed Henry Forde. He cursed everybody. But he had a lot of crowds. And he went around Barbados, obviously supported by the Democratic Labour Party, to say that I, Delisle Bradshaw, I either killed or had a hand in Pele's death. No other politician in Barbados, to my knowledge, has ever been accused of committing a murder. But I had to endure that. When Eric Seeley at one time said that I knew something about the death, I got a copy of a transcript and gave it to Sir David. Sir David. And he, along with Hudson Linton, decided that it was libelous. And Sir David headed my case before the law court. And he's the only person that ever got a judgment against Eric Seeley. This is Sir David. Sir David, I want to thank you.
I was pleased to do it pro bono.
You see, this is how we live. I call him Sinbad. He called me Braddock's. You know what I mean? So this is how we operated. In 1981, I moved from Parliamentary Secretary to Minister. But here's another story. In 1981, the elections following 1976, although there was a scandal, all kind of thing, as far as Brady was concerned, I was returned with a significant majority, bigger majority. In fact, I had a bigger majority than Billy too. That's right. So you see, I was determined. And in I want to say to the young candidates, don't let numbers fool you. I was the only one that reversed 1,100 votes in 1991 to beat Dr. Simmons. He beat me by 1,104, and they turned it around. During the period of 1981 to 86, I signed for the gymnasium that is in Barbados. The Labour Party should be proud of that. Not the Dems. We brought it here. And you will look across Barbados. David Simmons, thank you again. We worked very closely together. He built a number of... he was the chairman of the Sports Council. And we worked hand in hand. I had all the backup support. They used to call me a lawyer. I was a lawyer, but I never went to the bar other than Brady's. But I must tell you, I worked along with these guys. I was not underdog either because I could talk. Craig and I used to carry platforms, you hear? And nobody would want to come under our fire. We were not easy. Billy told me one day, said, Brad, you want Billy? Craig. Remember Billy? Because Craig was the hatchet man. Nobody could withstand Barrow, could withstand Lionel Craig. And because he was a good speaker, I followed him. I had a piece of brie and a piece of Lionel Craig. My tongue was and still is sharp. On both sides. So I have learned, and I said I sat at the feet of Gamaliel. Sir Ronald Mack, Sir Henry Forde, there was Lindsay Bolden, and there was Semencia Cox, L.B. Brathwaite. And we worked together. They stood by my side. And that is what made me the politician I am today. Fearless. And I am hoping that Santa, you could be as fearless as your father. Okay? And work with them. The Labour Party has some of the finest people in the world. And I can say this to you. I have no doubt. I smell in it. Mayor, you're going to be the next Prime Minister. I predicted that. I told you that long ago. I'm working with you. Whatever you need for me to do to help you, I will do it. Because you are one of the finest politicians I've ever met.
Thank you very much, Delisle. I now want to move to parliamentary debate. And Ezra Aline, you would have been Deputy Speaker of the House.
Yeah. And it was an interesting and moving learning experience to be presiding over a parliament in which you had Barbados scholars. I'm sorry. In which you had Barbados scholars on either side. I think, without being partisan, that the Barbados Labour Party had the better speakers. So Lloyd Sandiford, Branford Tate, and Barrow on his day were good debaters. but we had the better debaters. I remember Tom and Barra facing off against each other in the no confidence motion or the motion of censure against Burton Hines, and having to rule against both of them in terms of the length of their speeches and getting them to accept it. But the debates were sharp, and sitting there one had to be concentrating because people like Branford Tate would attempt to mash the crease. And I had developed a technique with him where as soon as he was about to mash the crease, I would pick the microphone up and he would back off. But there were some challenging, deeply challenging times when the two sides were going at each other. The thing about those debates was that Tom appeared always to be prepared. He had a deep range of historical knowledge, and he could draw upon his experiences in the United Kingdom, the history of the British parliamentary system, and his knowledge of local goings-on to defeat the other side. A very interesting and challenging thing. I think that this present crop of Barbados Labour Party candidates, I think this crop has the potential to equal that level of debate. But the debates generally have fallen away, and I think it's probably because of the style of leadership, and this is controversial, of the present Prime Minister. Tom raised the standard, kept the standard there. Barra equaled him in terms of the standard, but nowadays we do not have that level of cut and thrust. We have more personal attacks. But I think the Barbados Labour Party of the Great Combination days established the idea of principled attacks on differences in policy, dealing with the issue rather than kicking the man, kicking the ball rather than kicking the man. And I hope that we can return the level and the character of debate to that kind of
Now, a speech or a few speeches that stand out in your memory in Parliament?
The quality and the depth and the factual nature of the freehold tenantries legislation. I happened to be presiding part of the time, and Tom dealt with it in a historical manner. He dealt with the legal aspects of it. He was able to demonstrate how this piece of legislation was going to have a beneficial impact on those people who would benefit from it. But he was also able to demonstrate how he was changing and remediating the historical imbalances in the society by bringing the rural areas of Barbados on a par with the urban areas insofar as people could now own their title deeds. He stressed that repeatedly at the time, how they could improve their lot, and how he could in that way repay and repair some of the historical damage done to the people in those plantation tenantries. I personally have always thought that was the most important speech I heard in that Parliament.
Right. Thank you. If 76 to 81 was all about raising the standard of the quality of life of Barbadians, what was the intention of the 81 to 85, 86 term in office?
Could I,
Sure.
since I was not returned in 81, I would only be able to speak peripherally. In the meantime, may I be excused to visit the little boys?
Of course you may. Of course you may.
81 to 86. There were the years, from where I sat, my perspective, when we were putting a new pillar to the economy of Barbados. David made earlier reference to that. The central bank was going up. They weren't easy years. They were not easy years. But when I look back, the amount that we churned out, I was in the Ministry of Education at that time. And there was a wall about not quite as wide as this room would have ended there in my office. And I had it covered in charts. Every school that was being built. And I had to cover it in curtains so that when people came to see me in my office, they were minding my business. And I could tell on every building site what was happening on a particular day. And we just churned out the work. I had culture added a few months after, and that is when I established the National Cultural Foundation. But the trouble was that it didn't always remember that it was a foundation. It's not just a word that you use. And in my opinion, in subsequent years, it's lost its way. And I hope that one day it will come back to understand that it has an even wider function than the way in which we interpret it today. In those years, we were, I don't know how to say it. I mean, you were humming. You would go into the cabinet room and you could, even when we were eating lunch, we used to eat it at the table. And I disapproved of that. Found a little room where we could actually get up and stretch and sit down and have a meal and talk around. But that was all we talked about. And the vision was always a forward-looking vision.
Okay. Brady, 1981, did your load get any lighter?
Certainly. 1981. I recall negotiating with the Chinese government to have the gymnasium brought to Barbados. In fact, I signed that agreement on my birthday. Unfortunately, I lost, and it was left for the Dems to Louis Tull, who became the Minister of Sport, to complete it. Going forward then, I remember signing with the Canadian government a bilateral arrangement whereby Barbadians who worked in Canada and returned here would receive their pensions.
Okay.
I think that was landmark legislation on negotiation. Mm-hmm. And I also recall having had to build, as David Simmons said, continue to build on his legacy, because he has a real legacy. You don't mind Sir David Simmons. He liked to be too conservative, but I can tell you he was a tremendous minister. Billy is here talking. I tell you something, you would want to see them working and operating. And Sir Henry Forde, they work hard. I looked up to them. And as I said, that's what made me the person I am. I learned from you all. You didn't know that, Henry. I was learning. I had a hard act to follow.
We never went on calling programs every day.
Never did. That is true. We had no time. And you see, we were colleagues. We talked, we chatted. There was no dissension. Nobody said I didn't like you. Everybody I've never seen it in politics. I would like to welcome the candidates to be a little cohesive. These guys never left me alone. Okay. And that is what took me through. And I was able to work hard to build continual line of Christ housing legacy. The Dems and build any houses. It's the Barbados parties. They said, we built houses. Come at Oxnard, St. James, we did that. Up in Henry Bonnets. Even let him St. Joseph. We did Henry Forde. In the Ivy. We built them all. The Ferniehurst. We were there and giving people an opportunity to own a house. You could go and put your name down, and we made sure we got the houses built and you got them. We didn't have to. In fact, like now, huh? That's a fact. We work, as I said, that was a period that I admired the Barbados Labour Party, and I am proud to be part of that party, the great combination. Mayor, I'm going to address you because this is a session just for us to talk. You are capable of delivering the goods to this wonderful party. You see us here? We're looking forward for you to follow that great legacy and continue. And everybody here expects you to do it. I've determined that you are one person that I will walk blindly behind because I know of your ability. It is in your blood. It comes from your grandfather, your political blood, and your father be a martyr. Don't let anyone take that from you. This is politics now. The season is on. Shogun got to face up to me. May be not afraid of him. I will take him on. I am going after Frondell Stewart. He got beaten twice. He got beaten. He won a seat in 1994 by 83 votes. In 1999, he was sandpapered and whitewashed. He came down in time and got beaten again. A man with 2 defeats. Kurt Humphrey, give him the third for me.
At this time, I would like to invite to join us Aaron Truss.
John, could I just interject something about 81?
Of course you may.
Come here.
Please welcome Aaron Truss.
What I'm going to say now, I've been saying to candidates that I've interacted with in the last year, and it is very, very critical. I lost in Philip North in 1981 through overconfidence and naivety and carelessness. Joy Edwards was alive. No DLP lawyer would work for him when about 7 banks sued him. He ended up with me. I won all the cases, the MPSA. Millions of dollars. Joy was ever grateful. And he was telling me in 1981, all he knew was they were working on it. He said, David, they're working on it. He couldn't explain to me what was happening. I didn't know. My people, canvassers, reported that there was a man, tall, slim man with a briefcase and the electoral list, walking through Lades Hill and Bayfield. That was Frank Richards' brother. I did not know what he was doing. We did not carefully check our list. The result of that was that I lost by 143 votes to Frank Nation. After the election, now we are going through the list, and we found 171 names on that list that ought not to have been on the list. So I wrote a letter to Dennis Smith and copied all of these names and referred him to them. It took a few months and he got back to me. And Dennis Smith said, your findings are accurate. These people ought not to have been registered. You cannot blame the electoral department. It was your responsibility as candidate to clean that list. And thereafter, I never failed. Clean the list. These people will pad the list. Ask Jordley what happened in the last election. Now the postman, week before the election, is telling him, I am to deliver brochures for people. I've been out here for 10, 12 years. I don't know these people. Don't apply the things. Work on those lists and not making fun.
Right.
I want to help to drive this home. You should have cleaned your list by now. The next list you are going to see is the list for election day. I hope you're not coming with a whole bunch of changes of addresses and all that kind of thing. It takes time. Registering officers have to go up there and investigate. Takes time. At the same time, they are preparing polling stations and doing other work that they have to do to ready for the day. Those people who are coming onto the list for the first time, they are going to get preference because they're coming onto the list at the first time. People need to understand, even if you change, and I saw this in Mia's constituency at the last election because I went to 52 polling stations. And there was this woman in floods of tears. I went up to her, I said, what's the problem? And it turned out that her change of residence did not go through. And she was so upset that she refused to go back to where she was before. Because if your change of residence does not go through, it does not mean that you're not on the list. It simply means that you're going to have to go back to wherever you were and you will be on the list. We have done a lot. As Deputy Chair of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, we have done a lot to clean it as fast and as best as we can. We have new equipment. We have new ways of doing things. This old-time thing about you go into the polling station and you go up to the polling booth and you're facing the wall. And this is when ladies would go into the brassiere and gents would go into the BBBs to be taking out a camera. Well, we're not hiding it this time. Not only phones with cameras, glasses with cameras, watches with cameras, anything, you've got to put it in a basket. And we have turned the polling booth around so that you are facing the presiding officer and her poll clerk or his poll clerk next to them, who are watching you. They cannot see where you are marking your X, but they can see, well, they will be able to see that they're exposed. Your polling clerks, and I'm speaking to the candidates now, are also well placed so that they will have an eye. I don't know who's doing the training for these people, but that is key. They don't just sit down there and loiter and put the line through the name. They have to be watching everybody who is going to vote. I have done all of these tasks. I was a polling agent for David in the by-election. And you'll be amazed how friendly they're going to get, especially at lunchtime. Because the Dems weren't too good at bringing lunch. And in the city, I can only speak for the city, I used to tell my people, bring enough lunch so that everybody can get. But they too have to be trained that they have to keep the eye on the voter. The process is there. I have offered my services to help to brief people and so on. But you have to get it right. You cannot now fail at the last fence on election day itself. You have to know what you're doing. And you see those lists that your polling agents, they're not getting anything until they bring back this list to you. in the city, it was a great help to me because 3 years after the election, you know, somebody comes into my clinic, which used to be held on a Wednesday afternoon, evening, sometimes we did at midnight, because when we extended the polyclinics that they could open to 8 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight, I starve in, and people go home, feed the children, come back out, and they're prepared to wait till 1 o'clock in the morning. But those lists were important. People come in, you know, Miss Miller, I vote for you. I vote for you. I would say, I better bring that list here. I see your name on this list, you know, and he's smiling. But I don't see the lines through it which tells me that you went. Well, you know, that my grandmother had died. I said, this is the third time you're telling me how many grandmothers you got. You're going to beat that. You're going to beat every trick in the book. And that is why you have to be so careful. So careful. Don't be afraid to ask for help. But you have to be very, very careful in how you are prepared for election day. The candidate and the candidate's agent. Be very selective in who is your agent. If you break your foot and fall down, your agent at all becomes you. You have to know how to spread out the work, especially if it's a big sprawling constituency, on the day itself. These things, I don't want to hog the thing, but all of this you are going to have to be getting very familiar with within the next few days.
Thank you very much, Dame Billy.
Let me take up a point, a very, very
quick point, yes.
No, it's not only a quick point. No, this is serious. I have been working on Santia's list in Microsoft East. To date, every transfer that I've made have come on. Not those that are still in the pipeline. But, Dame Billy, not one of the objections that I made.
They'll come off of the finalists.
You see, that's the point. That's the point. We, the candidates, need to know so they can trace. They might come on at a time when you cannot, and the electoral office will not act quickly enough. I would have wanted to see the names off so that I could clean my list.
But I can tell you, the final list is when the objections will come off.
All right. Now, I want to bring it back. I hope the candidates are taking notes. And bring it back to a time that we cannot leave here tonight unless we talk about. And that would be the 11th of March, 1985. We have Aaron, we have Delisle, we have Sir David, Dame Billy, Sir Henry, we have Ezra. And I can give you my personal recollection of doing homework at my house in Vauxhall in Christchurch and hearing the news flash on Rediffusion that JM Tom Adams had passed. And the very next day, I think it was the Nation newspaper, Dame Billy, had a single shot of you standing on the balcony of government headquarters with a look that I can only describe as lost on your face. And I think it was a look that exemplified the feeling of the entire nation. So I want to talk about that, the day that Tom left us. I'll start with you, Aaron, as you're with us for the first time.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome, everyone. Yeah, especially you, welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation. Is this thing
Yes,
working?
we can hear you loud and clear.
Good. 1985, March 11th, I was in London. I was the Minister of Tourism and Environment at that time. And in London, after long meetings, the World Trade Center, we snuck off, my wife and I, to a tiny restaurant with my cousin in some obscure part of London. I didn't know then, I still don't know now. When a man came over to our table and said, excuse me, is there a Mr. Truss at this table? And I said, yes, I am, Mr. Truss. He said, there's a phone call for you, sir. I said, for me? I mean, here I am in the middle of a very small Chinese restaurant in the middle of London, and there's a call for me. I was a little bit, I've taken back. I said, well, where can I take the call? He said, you wait there, sir, and I'll bring the phone to you. He brought the phone over, he plugged it in. And it was a call from Barbados by Bree's secretary. He was searching for me. And he told me that Tom had passed that afternoon on March 11, 1985.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Louis Tull has joined us.
Welcome, Sir Louis.
Come this way.
As Tom would say, Lulu, sit down. Join us. So that's where I was, but if I may go back, because I remember in 1976, of which we were speaking in February, beg your pardon, when David Simmons was running. David in those days was a young and handsome man. I don't know what has happened. But all of us who were young, I had hair. I wear my hat now. But people complain that the hair is turning grey. Well, they do good. I don't have hair at all. So there's always a positive. And I remember canvassing over by Churchyard, was it? Church Village. Close to Church Village. And a man was telling me, we were in a rum shop talking, there were some people there. And a man said, well, I love that man, David Simmons, so much that I intend to give him my vote. I said, well, thank you very much. I was buying some drinks, not on behalf of the candidate. Of course, I don't even think the candidate knew I was there. He was not supposed to know. But he's not supposed to spend any money. And then a woman spoke up and said, man, I love that man, David Simmons, so much that I'm willing to give you anything you want. And we vote too. So, among the few votes that you won, David, on that occasion, I was present.
Thank you very much. Delisle, your memory of that day, March 11th. Microphone.
Well, you know, it takes me back to, I remember the day in Cabinet when we were waiting. The estimates were about to start. We all gathered in the cabinet room in Bay Street, awaiting Tom to arrive. I heard the cabinet secretary say, Prime Minister's dead. Just like that. So I couldn't understand what he was saying. Prime Minister's dead. And it was like this solemn. And I got wind of somebody, you know, Tom dead. And I went cold. I'm sure that was the feeling of all of us at Cabinet, in utter shock. It was then that Brees St. John was taken away from the meeting. And no doubt he went to Government House. He went to Government House. That's why it was done. We didn't have to vote. We knew that Bree was next in line, and the Prime Minister, that's how we lived. There was no waiting to vote or to ask who was going to Government House. And it was like that. A morning, we were waiting to debate we were waiting, assembled to go to Parliament to debate the estimates. And that was how it happened.
Yes.
But I can tell you my truth. I know how I felt because Tom was a real down-to-earth Prime Minister. Very down-to-earth. He made jokes to Louis, Lulu, Brady tricked me many a time. You know Cynthia? Yes, Cynthia. Yes, Cynthia. You won't like me to repeat that joke here now. But it's the truth. But Tom, the fine time you take, you'll come and take a picture of you. And I can see a man taking a picture and laughing at you. You're eating like it's over your face, cocker. That was Tom. You mind your business too. That's a fact. He knew everybody's business. And one thing I would like to give you all this, the young candidates. Tom knew everybody in their house by name. He found all the connections of people. Who is who? Tom took time to do that. As I said, a great man.
Yes. Sir David?
Yeah, I was I was at home the evening, and I heard it on the radio. My wife was at the registry, and she was in tears and called me and said that, asked me if it was a fact that Tom had died. He said, no, I'm hearing it on the radio. And she was telling me about the reaction in the registry. And she came home, and it was confirmed. Well, like everybody else, I was shocked. And there wasn't much you could say other than, how could this happen? He didn't live to see Highway 2A. It was a bad time. For me, it had certain consequences, which at time were not in my mind at 5 o'clock evening when I heard it. But by 8 o'clock the night, Lawrence Johnson, the late Lawrence Johnson, Jonathan Bullard, and Doris Bowman had called me and asked me if I would run in the by-election. The very night the man died, they had called Bree. They had called Bree and told him that they wanted me to run. And that is how it happened. That I went to St. Thomas to succeed him.
Dame Billie?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would like to bring a different facet to it. Louise reminded me that the language that I use cannot be repeated here tonight. And I heard the news. But Tom was at Delisle Court in this study on the telephone to the Inter-American Development Bank, making the case for a 4-lane highway. Vic Johnson was the minister at the time, and he was in Washington and called and said, I can't just make them understand that we know what we're doing. We can see into the future. And that was so carefully planned. We knew where all the housing starts were going to be in Barbados. We knew which roads were the most busy highways. To this day, Calamarock is still the busiest artery into Bridgetown. And we just could not persuade the bank that we wanted a 4-lane highway. And we knew what we were doing. And we were taking the economy to a place where it would be. Tom insisted it had to be an industrial highway linking the airport to the seaport. And Bernard St. John's great dream was that what he called sub-towns would grow up along it. And we have seen all of that come to pass. But later on, when the economy had expanded, and it was clear that we had to either have flyovers or widen the highway, the decision was taken then to widen it because benighted people throw away flyovers. Life would have been much different without them, if we'd had them. But the other party, to which I do not refer, I don't refer to my opponents in any way at all. All my years on the platform, never called a name. Why should I advertise then? When they came to widen the highway at certain places, they didn't even have to buy a foot of land. We had already, since the beginning, acquired the land for the 4-lane highway. And that is the Labour Party so often, making ground for others to run on. But that is how it is, and that is the task that is ours now once again.
Now, Sir Henry, I want to go to Sir Louis and once again thank him for leaving his important meeting this evening to join us. So we have traced 1976, we've gone up to 1981, we're now at 1985, but I want to take you back to some of your landmark legislation, first as Minister of Education, and again a personal story. 1978, a student at the Christchurch Foundation School, and the girls, Christchurch Girls Foundation School, and we want to band together to go to the Minister of Education because we do not want any amalgamation. with the boys. So let's start there. Your vision for mixed schools and what you hoped to achieve.
When I went into the Ministry of Education in 1976, I knew nothing about education. I had not written the manifesto or any part of it relating to education. I believe it was Nigel Barrow who was a key man in that area. Yeah, but there was one thing about the manifesto. When Tom called me and asked me to be Minister of Education, I told him just what he said, but I really don't know anything about education. And he said, you'll soon know. Which is true, I learned quickly. But what grabbed me as I read the manifesto, because I hope things have changed. In those days, you read the manifesto after the elections. They handed out a bunch of manifestos at a public meeting the week before the elections or something, and you're so busy trying to get yourself elected that you don't have any time to read all this manifesto stuff. So after the elections, you read it. So I went into the Ministry of Education. I read the manifesto relating to education. And what grabbed me most of all was the part that dealt with the number of school children at the age of 13 and 14 who were put out of school in those days. Not hundreds of them, thousands, large numbers of them were put out of school at the ages of 13 and 14 because there was no room in the inn for them. There were schools like St. Leonard's that had probably about 1,800 children and operated on 2 shifts. It was a morning shift, they went home, and then an afternoon shift because there was an acute shortage of secondary school places in Barbados. That was my first, that grabbed me. And immediately I summoned a meeting with the senior people, the chief education officer, Walter Burke, who was my permanent secretary, and said, this is what I'm dealing with first. All children up to the age of 16 should be in school. Under the laws of Barbados, you couldn't work before you were 16. So these kids couldn't go and work because it was against the law. We didn't believe in child labor in this country. And a number of these children had parents who were working, and at 14, especially the girls I was concerned about, who had nothing to do. So that was our priority. And I called these people together, and I told them that I wanted them to get all the children who were put out of school in the summer of 1976 to be returned to school within 2 weeks. That they should rate them, get in touch with them, get in touch with their former head teachers, get those kids back in school. And here's how we're going to do it. Because they look at me as if I was mad. Because where are you going to put them? I tell them, we'll do an inventory of all available government space for it. And church halls and whatever there was, we will find the space for them. I told them that I wanted teachers who were sensitive to the needs of slow learners, because these kids who were put out of school were clearly not the brightest. The brightest children always get away with it. There's always room for them. So these children who were put out of school were not too bright. Not the brightest, sorry. So I wanted them to find teachers who had retired within the last 2 years and who had a certain sensitivity to this kind of student. And I wanted them to get in touch with the School of Education at Cathedral. And I wanted a 10-day course for these teachers. Now, these are teachers who've been teaching for 40 years and are retired. Some were head teachers and so on. But I said, no, that's not enough for me. I want you to do a special course before these teachers go into the classroom to alert them to the sensitivity of the job they were doing and who they were dealing with and what they wanted taught. That I wasn't interested in academics. I was interested in preparing these children for the workforce. And we did this. We found some buildings, some old school buildings that had been abandoned for a year or two or more, and we put them in shape. And in all this, I was talking to the Prime Minister, Tom Adams, who was the Minister of Finance, because this costs a lot of money. To put 1,600 children back in school, and to find teachers to teach them, and to find all the materials necessary costs money. I must say that he was very cooperative. He wondered about the money, but he worked with me very well on it. Not like in some areas like when we first started push culture, there was a pushback. But in this particular project, he was all the way. Yes. And we did it. And I wanted in part, those of us who've been in politics have some great moments during and after. And some of my best moments are when I'm in the supermarket or I'm on a plane or I'm walking through town and somebody comes to me and says, Mr. Tull, I am one of those children that you put back in school in 1976. Now I'm a graphic artist, doing very well. I'm a senior nurse, whole set of different years. That is something I feel very proud about. And when they greet me in that way, I begin to well up.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful.
You want to take me to the foundation?
Let's go from, because we want to get in our question and answer session. I'm sure we've got some people eagerly waiting to have their turn with you. I want to go to 1986 because we've looked at achievements, we've looked at victory. 1986, the election of May, I think it was 28th? May 28th, 1986.
Leading up to the elections in 1986, after every cabinet meeting, members of the cabinet division, this after the meeting, they'd be saying, oh, I am going to beat this body. That is the LP opponent. Bad, and I am winning. And I used to say to them, I don't know if Brady, he was in the cabinet, Aaron Truss was in it. I don't know if you remember, but I kept saying he lived in a different country from me because that's not what I'm feeling. I'm getting a little feeling in the country that we are in trouble. And they would dismiss me. Well, you know the result. I don't know what else you want me to tell you.
I want to go actually around the... Sir Henry.
You remember the last cabinet?
Microphone, Sir David.
The last cabinet meeting before the election.
Get your microphone.
The cabinet secretary, Rogers, came in, and when he was leaving to go to lunch, he do all that. Did the LP manifesto, Richie Hayes manifesto, really us a mixed part of us? Yeah.
He was a big man.
Huh?
He was a big man. Sorry. He was a big man.
Go ahead.
In 1986, if you check those statistics, more people voted than any other time. You check this and see. So many people came and voted. I've never seen it before or after.
Sir Henry.
When you get that turnout is a vote against the government. That's all that happened.
Dealing with that defeat, picking yourself up and going forward, how did 3 people take on a government?
It really was one of the hardest times in the life of a politician. And the 3 of us who were left, it was really very, very difficult. But we were dealing not only with ourselves, we were dealing with a whole host of men and women, first, who had done the best they could. And I believe in the Labour Party. And we realized that we had to rebuild. And let me say that I got 100% support from all of the constituencies. There was, I suppose, the most disheartening thing is contrary to what the Dems always lie about us on. We had no money. We had to rebuild the party. We had to reorganize it. We had to find new people to bring into the party, looking to the future. And we had the support of those who were true Labourites. You have something over there. We had to find money. I think Louis would tell you there were weeks, and David would tell you there were weeks that we couldn't pay anybody. I hear these people going around and talking about how the Labour Party have all of this money and doing this. That's never been true of the Labour Party. We really have had to pull our own pockets, and in fact, I'm sure Louis and myself, we were 2 of the guarantors. Other people there. And that guarantee only got satisfied recently. So that it wasn't an easy task to try to rebuild the party, but I thank God, and I, in my last days here on earth, thank the Labour Party family for rallying again and realizing what a rich history we have. And I got 100% support in trying to rebuild the party. As a matter of fact, it's also in that period of time, 86 going to 91, gave me the opportunity on behalf of the party to look around and find the best young people that we could find. And there she is. And here's Elizabeth Thompson. Those are two of the people who joined the party then. And I said to Mia, I'm not a god as you know, but I honestly believe that your fate is going to make you the first woman prime minister of this great country of ours. So, but we built the party because everybody rallied. There will be times that we will have our disagreements in the party, but never let them lead any of you to destroy what is a fantastic institution and that has achieved so much for our own country. I could call Louis Tull at any hour, at the last minute, if I had an engagement. You were chairman. I was chairman, and Louis would go. I can phone David Simmons and say, David, I have to go and make a speech somewhere, help me out. And he was there. And I hope that that will continue in the party. That we will realize that God has given us a good opportunity to do well by our fellow men and fellow women.
Thank you.
We survived, and look where we are now. We have been, I believe that this group of people can give us a fantastic result whenever somebody understands that they have a duty to the country. Call an election and let us get it on with preparing. So yes, we have made it, and we will make it.
All right. My final area I want to look at memorable moments, in particular on the campaign trail, because something tells me that y'all have some stories that we need to hear. So Louis says it will take too long.
Some of them we shouldn't tell either.
You're taking your second break.
I'm taking a diuretic.
No problem. No problem.
Let me tell you one about William Dugan. William Dugan is a fantastic canvasser. First, I don't know how many of you realize that William used to run around with one of Tom's sons, eating the people's food all up in St. George when Tom was in St. George. But William is a fantastic canvasser. And canvassed with me and canvassed for me and helped me in my area. And that's one of the reasons why the people of Christchurch West love him so much. But one Sunday we were canvassing and it was getting on to about 3 o'clock. And William kept saying, we've got to do this one and we've got to do the next one. I said, William, look, this is the last one. And he said, no. We have to wear Rocky then. You have to go to this particular house. This lady wants to see you, says she wants to see you. So we went to the particular house and we knocked, William knocked. And when the lady came out, unfortunately she hadn't put on her clothes. No, we could only see her hair. She was moving through the window. But I beat retreat. So there are those moments as well that are really human moments. But she was one of our strong supporters, and probably still is with him, I don't know. But one of the things I want to leave with candidates is you have to canvass. You have to follow up if you promise someone that you're going to do something for them. You may not succeed. Someone may want to get a house, and you can't get the house, but you have to follow up. Let me say that I still have, down at my town office, letters that I have written from the first time that I won a seat in Parliament. And for people, affidavits that I've drawn for them. So you always have to follow up. Don't take it for granted that you're going to win regardless. You have to keep working. And one of the reasons why I think I got the 7 elections is because Mr. Ronald Grant's father, who had been a founder member of Sir Grantley Adams of the
Progressive League?
Not of the, no. He was a founder member of the Barbados Workers Union. And when Bernard St. John said that I had to go and run in Christchurch West, and he and Tom, Bernard St. John, yes, and Tom, I went to, and I asked Bernard, where do I go? He said, go to Mr. Grant. I said, but I don't know who is Mr. Grant. He gave me enough particulars that I went. And Mr. Grant says, you come here to make a fool of me or I make a fool of you. Are you serious? And one of the things I was taught is, go and canvass. Even at this late hour, show your face and show the respect for the persons who vote you up. And you will get it.
Yes. Dame Billie?
Yeah. I would support Henry in that. The city is compact. And I used to like to be able to get up on that first meeting and say that I had been into every single house, not once, not twice, but 3 times. There is no such thing as a DLP house or a BLP house. The first time I went canvassing with Griffo, he would say, don't go into them as dancing. You know, he was very particular. He wasn't even going on the front step. To the point where he had to say, Griffo, don't let people feel we quarreling in the middle of the road. I am going into every house. I'm the candidate. I remember going up the top step of a house on the 8th Avenue in New Orleans, and I could hear the voices from inside talking, and one woman was shouting, Mom, Ma, build this and build that. I looked back, I said, Griffo, we ain't got to build living at this house, because I now know the list by heart. He said, no, you idiot. Now washing this about you. And that, it was 7 o'clock. And then I said, Griffo, when the time that thing begins, no more cameras. Because their business used to get on as though these people were members of their family. But you have to go into every single house. I like to tell this story. I was in New Orleans again, and I go into this house. Griffo's not coming in. There are them's in there. And only certain people in Barbados, you know, will be allowed in through the front door. The priest, the doctor, the undertaker eventually, the lawyer coming to make a will or whatever, and the MP. But I'm not an MP, I'm only a candidate. Anyhow, I was let in. And there's this man, I can see him now in short khaki pants, and he's rocking away, king of his castle. Well, I want you to know that I am not voting for you nor your party. I said, that is all right, sir, but it is my duty to come to tell you what my program is for the city of Bridgetown and to ask you for your support. But all the time he is all big prints and so on, the wife is now standing up in the doorway leading into the kitchen, and she is so you know straight away. Some of the chiefest of my canvassers in the city of Bridgetown never knew that their wives always voted for me. They're gone, but they didn't know that. But you have to go into every house and ask questions. Make sure, always, I have a very strict way of canvassing. I got somebody walking ahead, knocking on doors saying I'm coming, because people still like to place look a certain way, you know, when people are coming in. The person with the list who's my chief canvasser is walking with me. But the first person the voter must see is the candidate. None of your canvassers must be in front of you. And you're going up with hand out to greet and meet whoever. Meanwhile, you're in the house, your chief canvasser with the list, or whoever is your captain in that particular district, is asking quietly and talking to people now what they would like to see and so on and so forth. And they're checking out whoever is on the list and who may not be in the house at the time and cleaning the list as we go. But then I always had a man who was not particularly known in that part of the city, straggling a good 8 or 9 houses behind me. Sometimes you couldn't see him when you look back. But he's listening now for the comments. Oh my, she come in here now. You see, she since the last election, so she can beg somebody for a vote. Now he has to know who it is. He has to be able to point out the house after the canvass. And I know I have to go back there. Every single house, people take, what is the word that we use in Barbados? But people take offense.
Umbrage.
Umbrage. I was thinking to say that, but offense. But wait, she didn't stop at me. And you'll be amazed. Somebody who voted for you for the last occasion. So you have to be very careful as a candidate. You have to do that work. So I'm very supportive of Henry. You cannot beat canvassing. You just can't beat it. I do not know of any other way.
We're now going to go in the interest of memorable moments from you, Sir David, and then we're going to go to the audience for some comments and questions. So your memorable moments on the campaign trail?
You want me to be here your whole life?
Give me one. Give me one.
I give you one from the by-election of 1976, St. Philip North by-election. And this one is dedicated to the memory of Nigel Craig. I insisted as a candidate that the Democratic Labour Party as the government should hold the first meeting. I was not holding the meeting before that. They must come and tell the people what they did or did not do to St. Philip. So, they had a whole set of young boys in church village that were supporting. The boys positioned themselves on St. Philip's church wall. The dames are holding the meeting on the boys' school path. And these are all boys looking for work. Some of Louis, 14-year-olds or whatever, that had been turned over to school, can't get anything to do. So one of the things we were talking about was the need for educational expansion in 6 roads, and talking about a polytechnic or something like that. So the boys asked Sleepy Smith when he's addressing the crowd, well, what about bringing a polytechnic up here, man? And Sleepy replied, for a bunch of monkeys like y'all. The election wasn't won then. But Frank Walker came on next. And when he came on, when you hear the crowd, heavy roll. Heavy rolling, he puffing, he going up. And the boys start to heckle him. He said, hey, I ain't interested in one. Got a bad smelling, ugly, waffly. The election is about to be lost. Because 2 nights after that, we launched our campaign, same place. Lionel Craig comes on the platform. I don't need the mic for this, I can demonstrate. You all remember Craig used to have a little towel over his shoulder, a bottle of Alcalada, and he comes on the platform, puts down. Then he do so, reach in his back pocket, out the order. He said, off right, walk up right here and said, well, it smell bad.
Election won. Thank you so much. And it is at this time. Do you have a memory to share with us, Louis? We're going to go straight then to the audience. This is going to be a quick question and answer session, about 10 minutes duration in the interest of time. The microphone is in the center of the aisle. Thank you, Charlie. And I would just ask that you would come to the microphone and you can give us your name and then get on with your question. Who's going to go first?
Yes, I have to give my name, William Dewey.
Yes.
I guess this one goes back to the time after the first election win. And it always intrigued me about the handling of the Cubana disaster. And I especially want to hear from Dame Billie, because I've heard her speak of it before. And how did such a new cabinet handle such a disaster as the Cubana disaster at that time?
Dame Billie?
I can be very short on that. I had been offered the Ministry of Health. After my by-election in the city, the next day, I was on a mini-mo, going everywhere, saying thank you to everybody. And so after the general election, I was doing the same thing. 2 days, I could cover the whole city. And then I got a phone call one night, and Tom Adams said, where have you been? I have been calling you. I said, well, and I told him what I was doing. He said, but why weren't you sitting next to the phone? I was so green and ignorant then. And I said, well, and I told him what I was doing. He said, you should have been doing what the rest of your colleagues were doing. Sitting at the phone waiting for my call. Anyhow, he offered me the Ministry of Health. We had not yet moved into our ministries when the Cubana disaster happened. I remember I was coming down the steps in James Street, just Epworth Chambers, and just as I was coming down, Bernard St. John was coming up, and I stopped him. I said, St. John, I mean, this thing, I mean, it's falling now into me. What? I haven't even moved into the ministry yet. I mean, what to do? He said, Billie Miller, go on, do your work. That was the end of that. But it had to be done. And I must say, I had an excellent reception from the people in health, the chief medical officer and so on, because my first job, even before I moved into the ministry, was to get those cadavers back to Cuba. It was not an easy experience, and it was not going to be the last time that I would be doing something like that too. Not nice, but we did the best that we could do for it. And many, many years later, when I was paying an official visit as a foreign minister to Cuba, and I was taken to the Plaza of the Revolution, and there was a huge
museum.
Yes, to Jose Marti. And everything was about his history, except for a vast wall, maybe 4 times the length of this, and very high up. And it was just a lot of people, and I said, but this is not of Jose Marti's time. What is this? And they said, this was when the plane was blown up off Barbados, and Fidel, as he liked to be called, he had a huge meeting, millions, in the Square of the Republic, and this is what it was. And when I was being driven back to the place where I was staying, Permanent Secretary sitting next to me, my counterpart, Minister of Foreign Affairs, sitting next to the driver of the car, I turned to him and I said, people seem so moved by this. It was so different. I was touched by it. I said to him, shouldn't we be doing something? Maybe some kind of monument which will speak to it? And my counterpart turned back. He was sitting next to the driver, and he said, if you will do that, madame, Fidel himself would come. And he did. And he did. There's an effort, I believe, trying to get underway to see if they could dive up some of the remnant of, I don't know if what could be there now, but it was just a very, very difficult time. But the Cubans have never forgotten what Barbados did.
All right, thank you. Next. Cynthia?
Blessed good evening to everyone. I must say this is one of the most memorable moments in politics in this lifetime I've been living, and it has been a long time. And I want to thank those who have coordinated. I want to go back to the 1976 period, and to ask any of you honorable ladies and gentlemen there to speak to us very briefly about the polyclinics where the Barbados Labour Party pays so much special attention to the health of Barbadians, as well as the National Assistance Board, and finally the National Sports Council. And what are your views on the daylight saving time policy that Tom Adams came in, and do you think it will be relevant today? Thank you.
A lot of areas. Who's going to go first?
Sorry?
Said a lot of areas. Who's going to go first?
Okay, the polyclinics. The polyclinics, as David recalls, were in the manifesto. My father had been a Minister of Health before me in the 1950s. 2 terms, those 10 years. the modernization of Barbados began. And there were a number of health centers. But in Cuba, in the early 70s, when the women's movement was getting underway, I was selected by women in Barbados to go to the big government meeting. Gertrude Eastman went to it. But, you know, they would never have taken on the opposition. But the one for the socialist countries was being held in the GDR, the German Democratic Republic at that time, which was East Germany. And I had to go via Cuba, Spain, Moscow, to eventually get there. And I saw the first polyclinic. And I was allowed to go in and have a look around and to ask questions about it. Very old-fashioned in terms of, you know, a kidney dish was all cracked up and so on, but you could understand exactly how it would work. And so this was something that I thought we were just right with Barbados. I don't want this meeting to finish without my making this critical point. The Barbados Labour Party is the party of decentralization. Whenever the other people come in, everything in the city. Don't care where you come, how many buses you have to get. Everything. And from the beginning, in the 50s, it was like that. The first health centers. And it didn't matter if it was in the constituency of the other people. Gall Hill. 6 roads, or many. But the whole idea of the polyclinic was to go beyond what the old health centers used to do. The old health centers focused on maternal and child health, which was a terrible thing in those days. When I was a child, and I'm in town with my mother, she meets up her friends, that's the second question, how are you doing? Then the next question, how many children you got? And you would hear 8 or 10 living, 4 or 5 dead. There were always 2 numbers. Even in my own family, my first sister died at 5 months. So that was it. Maternal and child health, the mortality and the morbidity rates were horrible. But by the late 1950s, with the health centers, Barbados won something called the Kettering Shield. Of all the countries in the world, Barbados won the Kettering Shield for maternal and child health. And that was what the polyclinics were to do. But I had a vision that they would have a wider, and the wider hasn't happened because when we left government, not everything had been achieved. Everyone should have radiology in it. You should have 4 or 5 cubicles to do, you know, small surgical things and so on. We had even extended the opening hours of the polyclinic to 8 o'clock at night. And a certain gentleman who shall be nameless, because he was health minister for so short after 1986 that nobody remembers that he was health minister. But he did the worst thing. He took it back to 4 o'clock in the evening opening. And we have to come back to 8 o'clock in the evening. And we have to bring these services which were planned before into the polyclinic. All of the primary care services should be in the polyclinics.
Daylight saving time was another comment of Cynthia's, and then we're going to go to Trevor Prescott.
Sports Council. Brady and Lionel were the 2 ministers that I recall, and I was chairman. But did they have a sports council at the time? No, the sports council was, I think, Craig. That came after. Yeah. Our idea for the sports council was to create more physical facilities for the young people, spread across the island, just as Billy was saying, without undue reference to political affiliation. As we were able, we wanted to introduce floodlighting, particularly in the country, to give the children something to do after 6 o'clock with basketball. So you see the hard courts and so on. We built many pavilions. When I was chairman, my name was chairman, I think I might have built 3 alone in St. Thomas. I wasn't a minister, so I had to help the people in St. Thomas. But we had a couple of hard courts. There was Holy Innocent, Cynthia, Content, Bridgefield, and Prout. Prout was then part of St. Thomas. But what I wanted to see, and I don't think it has been done, as part of the alignment with the sports tourism venture, was to create, I think in the plan that we wrote, to create about 13 top-class facilities, such as you had at, we would take St. Catherine, for example, have a nice pavilion, proper playing field, properly manicured, not off and on, properly manicured. So you could invite the teams from England in the winter to come out here, and they won't have just to use Kensington. They like the experience. Believe me, I know, having been involved in it, they like the experience of coming to St. Catherine and eating rice and stew. Believe me, and drinking banks. And I wanted to see that kind of thing replicated. As I say, we identified 13 areas, I can't remember all now, as an attraction for the sports tourism effort. We dealt with the coaches as we could afford to increase the complement, but we started with a core group for in every sport. So we had cricket, football, whatever. And gradually, of course, the thing is expanding. But the Sports Council is in a mess today, a thorough mess. And I'm not speaking about the directive that went out this morning. You know, that anytime there's going to be a public meeting at a playing field or a pavilion, you have to apply, and it has to have ministerial approval. That went out today. That follows the meeting at Bear Hall. Bear Hall has inspired all of that. But I'm not in politics, you know, you all know that.
Trevor Preston.
Good night to the elders. Witnessing this configuration, I believe it says something to me for sure, and I would like to believe it says something to most of us. Now, what we are experiencing here should never be a one-off affair. It should never be. It says to us that there is a void in our system of governance. I think I learned that lesson here tonight, that there's a void in our system of governance. That when you're out of Parliament and you have persons with an abundance of experience, also complemented by intellect, it is a major mistake in governance for us to slice them and jettison and put them aside. It is saying to us that at this point we should correct that wrong. And that in our governance there should be an existence of a council of elders who, rather than be waiting once, I can't even say annually, or once at some point in our lives, the knowledge which you have actually shared with us, no. It would be a big mistake for us to allow that to just vanish, and that these people who will take up government in a few weeks' time will have to experiment with the people's lives, right, in order to do the right thing when you all possess the knowledge that can give us the required guidance as a political organization. I want to suggest that this party take the concept of reform. I know you've been talking about decentralizing, right? That there should be a unit of the elders in this political party. And I'm hoping that y'all will act and put it down as a proposal, and I hope that the elders will accept the offer if it is made by the leadership of the
I would also...
I want to pledge my support for that idea, because I want all candidates to realize one thing. Don't get above yourself. Don't be cocky. You are not the Labour Party. It is all these and the thousands around Barbados that you must represent, and on whose behalf we will speak. You are just a representative. Don't let it go to your head, please.
Before we go to our penultimate question, I would also like to ask to come to the microphone to deliver some brief remarks. We also have with us former Minister of Energy, Clyde Griffith. Clyde?
In the meantime, somebody took my car keys. You have them? Oh, okay.
All right, good evening to all. My name is Clyde Griffith. I listened very carefully, and I want to put some things in perspective. I was one of the very fortunate people to be personally close to Tom Adams. Very, very fortunate. And I learned a lot from him. I happened to be in the cabinet and also General Secretary of the party at the same time when he was Prime Minister. He asked me to run for the post of General Secretary because he had some things in mind. In the first place, were Tom alive, we would not have had an election in '86. He and I sat down in November '84 and planned a general election for '85. The reason being that we lost the first by-election in St. Peter by 1 vote. We went to court, he went to court, and got a second by-election. And he masterminded that win for Oinafa by 238 votes. To the point where he, in one box in Indian Ground, he told me that Alpha was going to get 207 votes, and he got 208. That was remarkable. Okay, so I hear a lot of foolishness about how he died and all. I want to put it in the public domain that Tom Adams had a bad heart. He had a bad heart. He had, yes, and he had a heart murmur which was discovered by William St. John, the late William St. John. And I remember in 1984 when he called me to Electoral to talk about after the second by-election. He said, Clyde, we cannot win the elections in 1986. We were talking about 18 months hence. He said, we cannot win in 1986. And he gave me a list of reasons why we couldn't win. The one thing he didn't tell me that himself was failing. He did not tell me that. But when he came back from England, went to see his doctors in February '85, he called me and he said, let's go to July. Let's plan the election for July. Get the candidates together for July. And we never did, because he said we could not win in 1986. And there's some things that I happen to know because I was close to it. And I happen to know because I was in the cabinet. For instance, this Airport West Coast Highway that we call the ABC Highway, there's a lot of crap. It was his idea and his alone that he planned, and he even had problems with some members in the cabinet who said that they weren't in favor of it. And he alone conceptualized that airport highway, and he said the IADB would lend us the money only if we were looking at the economics. that would accrue to having the highway built. And every time I pass through Warrens, I sing Tom Adams' praises. I am very disappointed that the Barbados Labour Party came to power and never renamed the highway the Tom Adams Highway. I don't call it anything else but the Tom Adams Highway. It's a bunch of foolishness to feel that the man who gave it to the Democratic Labour Party, Don Blackman, he and Tom were loggerheads. Barrow was against the highway. Barrow spoke up against, he and Steve Smith spoke up against the highway. And where was Cummings? So how could it be an ABC highway? And it was Tom Adams and Tom Adams alone who came up with the idea. So I want to make sure that people understand the real story about the 85 by-election the general election we were planning for July 85. And he said that after election, he was going to win the election and step down. Unfortunately, he died a month later, and I heard all kinds of foolishness. But I happen to know, I was close enough to him to know that he was not well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clyde.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
My name is Owen Williams. I'm with me. Not only has the panel done brilliantly.
Use the microphone, can I hear
Yeah, he needs to pull it up a bit. Yes, put it up.
Not only, they've not simply taken us back in time, but they have pointed us to the future. Now, my question is, and I'm beginning to understand why the other side, the other side from the BLP, finds it so difficult to do things because the BLP seems to have done almost everything in development. So they can only destroy. I'm not on the political platform. My question is, during the time, there was a time of development, whether it's structural development, social development. So there were these opportunities for the brilliant minds and the engaging hands to pursue these successfully. The National Cultural Foundation and all of these areas of development. Now my question is, with the state of the economy in Barbados, there's a tendency, and not only national state, but also the state in everybody's cupboard, in everybody's house. You're feeling it. And therefore it opens the way for inducement. What message can we carry? National message can we carry? Not only at the constituency level, but at the national level about development. Where is Barbados going? What message can the party take to the nation about development so that it will minimize? Strong enough to convince those who might be tempted to respond to inducement. But the sense of national development, what message can we carry at this stage at the national level?
Yes.
That one is asking to trespass on the manifesto. The best person to articulate that is the leader of the party. And I don't think that this is the forum for that, because there will be too many components of the manifesto for us to attempt to do justice. We couldn't do justice to it. So I don't think we should get into that. Mm-hmm. What I want to assure you of, as I recognize your accent, you are not born in Barbados. You may be a citizen now, but you weren't born in Barbados. And historically, the Barbados Labour Party has been called upon since 1972-73 to rescue Barbados and resuscitate the economy after a period of government by the Democratic Labour Party. And I'm not just saying it like that. I don't want you to believe it blandly. I want to give you evidence. 1972-73 is the oil crisis I spoke about earlier tonight when I was talking about 76. Things were so bad, we came along in 76, led by Tom, and we corrected everything that was wrong. And started to diversify the economy. By 1986, for the second time in its history, the Democratic Labour Party, in order to get the Barbados Labour Party out of office, aligned itself with another group. People forget, 61 was Mia's grandfather's BNP. 86 was Don Blackman and a host of lies about this country, about white shadows. And I thought, white shadows? What's happening in Barbados today now? Where are the white shadows? They're in the shadows. This was supposed to be the party, this Labour Party, that was on the side of big business. Who is on the side of big business now? But in 86, the people fell for the alternative budget that back-raised Britain. That document, I said that the cabinet secretary came into the cabinet and showed us the last. Promised to give away everything. Some people interpreted that they would get $10,000 in their hand. They decimated us. Decimated us. 24 to 3. Barr died in 1986. Barr died in June 1987. And by 1988, Sandyford introduced something called the stabilization tax, like the consolidation tax they had a couple of years ago. And we were in trouble as a country. Richie Haynes parted company with Sandyford because they could not agree on the policies. In fact, those of us who were in the House will recall the day that Barra himself appeared to part company with Richie over the Japanese bullet loan. Henry went to Charles Road Bridge at the meeting for the 1991 election. Market Hill, but I think you heard him in Charles Road Bridge. Market Hill, and told the country that we were going to go into the IMF. They didn't want to hear. Sandyford came out and said, Henry lied. Henry could not disclose the source of his information. I knew who it was. We couldn't disclose the source of the information, but we had it. The country wanted to listen to us. Sandyford got down there in Fairchild Street and said the economy performed its cigar free soap was firing on all cylinders. And by 1992, reduction of Emoluments Act, 8% cut, 4,000 jobs. Again, unemployment 24.7%. And in 1994, the Labour Party threw up now, no longer a lawyer, but an economist and a financial expert to lead us. And one after let us, I give him credit. Tremendous brain, tremendous intellect. But you remember, many young people ask you, well, why should we, what we've got to offer? Remind them, he said that he would create 30,000 jobs. Everybody laughed and poo-pooed it. He did it. And that is one of the differences between us and them, because we promised and we have the guts to perform, and not only to perform, to come and write it down at election time, give you a document saying, those were our promises, that is the performance. They can't do that.
And we now welcome to the microphone John Williams. Good evening, John.
Good evening, everybody. John Williams, as the moderator said. The name of Sir Harry Bernard St. John's name was called. And as Sir David was speaking, it reminded me of 1986. There was something that happened a week before the elections of 1986 that etched in my mind. And I know those persons who sat around that table on that Sunday would recall. and I'm looking at a lot of you. You would all remember that negotiations with the National Union of Public Workers was going on. And the union offered, the government offered the union at the time 10%. But then the party had to deal with the issue of what was referred to as the back raise. You all recall? Now that Sunday, Lionel Cry got up. Bree, as we would call him then, was in the chair. He says, Mr. Chairman, the 15,000 hurting me, man. He said, do something. Do something. And I never forget the words of Bree. He looked down that entire table, and I was sitting at the bottom, along with people like Elby Braffett and Craig and a lot of us. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I will do nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not even to win an election. The result would be to destroy this country. He said, and this was it. He said, any one of you who want to get up and come and sit in this chair and lead us for the next week, I am prepared to get up and leave. But that is my position. Craig uttered these words, and this was 1986. He said, fellas, we did. We ended up with 3 seats. But I say that to say this. That was part of a group of people who had the interests of this country at heart and would do nothing to destroy it. Nothing to destroy it. And the remarkable thing is that everybody left there knew that the task was even more difficult, but recognized that the interests of Barbados came first. I wanted to speak about Tom Adams, my very good friend. As you all, some of you remember, I ran in St. John in 1981. And that was because of... Pardon? If I stayed the deposit, I'm not quite sure. I am not sure. I know I came in by a 707. But the one thing I want to remind the MBD is this. In 1976, I left work. At that time, I used to work at KMRS as a technician engineer. And myself and a guy by the name of Ken Reese, we left to go to town to set up some speakers down in the Lower Green. When we got there, we saw a man by the name of Miller putting up these hanging speakers in the trees and whatever. So Ken and myself, we went to him and said, well, really, I mean, what's going on here? And the policeman was there, and we said to him, we have permission, we were given permission to hold our meeting there and, well, explain to us what's happening. And those were the days, really, where those fellas used to wax large and in charge. So the police said, well, first come, first serve. He said, but it can't be first come, first serve because we had permission. But, you know, Ken was always a peacemaker. Ken said, well, don't look, let's get hold of Billie. No, Billie. Or let's get hold of Tom. Billie, you can take it from there because in less than 15 minutes and many more turn up, you can tell us all about it.
Tom and I were 111 Robert Street when the news came. We knew there was going to be a fight for the last night because my first meeting was at the Lower Green, and I was wanting to go back there for the last meeting. There were many moats in the yard, and I jumped into one and went down there, God knows what speed. And yes, I saw Trevor Miller and these fellas setting up. Tom was in a mini moat behind me, hoping and praying that I wouldn't curse down the place. And he said, just cool it. Because when I was booking that meeting, I asked Tom to come with me in the presence of the police chief to say, this is what we have booked. And Tom just said, calm down. Let's go back to base and see how we're going to correct this. And he asked me, what is the biggest and the best place in the city apart from the Lower Green? What is now, if you're going down the boardwalk, a big car park, the Carlisle car park? I said, that is the only place that I could think of. And Bernard St. John said, man, we could fix up a meeting there, man. My friend Trevor Talma, man, he got his dental office, we got electricity, man, and work for the meeting. And I then had to go back to the Central Police Station to book that, and they allowed me to do that. I went home to change. This is my last night in the first, this is my election campaign, and when I got to the Four Cross, Baxter's Road, Westbury, came up Barbary Hill, the road was jammed, and I had to park my car there and walk. Sidewalks, everything. I've never seen such a big crowd in my entire life. And I am walking. A lot of people didn't know who I was, but I had to get to the meeting. But I had my runners, and I asked them to go down, because the Dems had set up their meeting, and to just come back and give me an idea of the size of the crowd and so on, and they came back. So when I got up to speak, I said, ladies and gentlemen, the story is known. I booked the spot, and the other people took it from me. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, my information is that they have the spot, but we have the crowd. And the roar went up. I thought the place was going to explode. And from there on in, I mean, we knew we were on the road. That kind of low-down stuff is what we had to be putting up with in those days.
We also have with us tonight Mr. Vic Johnson, I'm told. Yes. And we would like to, at this time, acknowledge his presence and invite him to the microphone. We don't see him very often, so I think he deserves another round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. I hadn't anticipated speaking tonight, but I must confess that having come to this meeting, I'm inclined to agree with my colleague here that we ought to do this stuff a little more often. One of the things that stands out in my memory is the camaraderie that we used to have during the days when the Labour Party was really kicking on all cylinders. The meetings at headquarters used to last until about 3 o'clock in the morning. After NEC, nobody went home. All of us lingered around, and in those days, there used to be a royal battle between the parliamentarians and the regular members. It was hardly possible for a regular member to get on the national executive because there was always this jockeying of the MP to be sure that he's on there. And after that meeting, then we would go down to the bar and we would mingle. And I, having come here this evening, I'm feeling kind of nostalgic, like I would like a piece of the action. I came into politics in a strange kind of way. I was confident enough in those days, or foolish enough, like John Williams, to believe that I could contest in St. John. And I told Tom that. And I moved to St. John in a plantation house called Eastmont to register my presence there. And promptly the returning officer for St. John, I can't recall his name for the life of me, but he presented himself at Eastmont, and he told me he was going to be moving a court suit against me because I was improperly registered in St. John, when in fact I ought to be registered in St. Michael. And he was going to he was trying to intimidate me. But in any case, I before it came to the point where we would have a showdown, I was invited by Tom to take on St. Michael West, as it was then. I don't know how many of you here can remember who the candidate was for St. Michael West that I was asked to take on, but it was one Frank Walcott. And I was a little strapling. My father, my mother, and everybody that I knew at the time said, Vic Johnson, please go and sit down and keep yourself quiet and don't embarrass the family. You know, my father begged me, don't make a fool of yourself. Well, I was foolish enough to go, and I went. And I came, and I saw, and I conquered. I beat Frank Walker by 552 votes. And Heather from the Advocate newspaper had a big headline the next day, Vic the Giant Killer. I still have it at home. But I don't know where, so many things I would like to talk about tonight, but you guys wait until midnight to ask me to say stuff. And I really would just like to say it's good to be here. I think this is a wonderful feeling. I can feel it in the air. May Molly have no fear. You will be Prime Minister of Barbados. There's not much left in me now, but whatever little drip there is in the bottle, I am prepared to offer it and ask you if you can do anything with it.
Now you understand why we waited until midnight to invite you.
If I might say something though, we were talking nostalgically about the ABC Highway, and I thought I ought to recollect, since you were asking us how that event at Tom's Passing touched us.
Yes.
I was in Washington. Tom had asked me to go up to Washington to negotiate with the IADB about the highway. I don't know if you can recall, the contract had gone out, and it was generally felt by all of the people that Carl Williams had won the contract. But the Inter-American Development Bank felt that we hadn't. And the Winkler, the head of the Venezuelan firm, was called Winkler. It turned out that the head of that firm was the brother-in-law of the president of the bank. So they had it, and they were contending back and forth about the thing. And Tom told me, you got to go to Washington and you got to put a case. So I went. And we had some meetings, and I filibustered into the morning with the bank, to the point where they said, okay, if the best thing to solve this is let's go back out the contract. And they went back out, then the Canadian firm won. But the point I'm making, the night before, Tom called me in Washington. He said, Vic, I want you to tell me, keep me posted on what's happening here. And do not come back to Barbados without the bacon. I am going to be, I can say this, I suppose, gambling somewhere down and at somebody's place. I can't recall who it was. So he told me, you call me, and he gave me the number to call him at.
Cheapside, yeah.
Hey, Cheapside?
Yeah, man.
He told me where it was. I can't remember all the details. He gave me the number to call him. And I was at breakfast in the restaurant early in the morning, and my breakfast had just been served, and the man at the bar came over and said, "Are you Vic Johnson?" I said, "Yes, the phone is for you." And I looked around and said, "How can the phone be for me? I'm in Washington. Nobody knows even that I'm here. So what's this all about?" And he said, "The phone is for you." It was Tony Best on the phone. And he said, "Vic, I got some bad news for you." He said, "The Prime Minister is dead." And I said, "Tony, don't play the fool with me so early in the morning. It's too early to play games." He said, "Vic, Tom is dead." I said, "Man, Tony, don't talk foolishness." He said, "Vic, he's dead." And right away, all the blood drained from my body, and I forgot that I was supposed to be eating breakfast. Left, went upstairs, booked my passage, and came back to Barbados. With an emptiness that still... I have 2 large pictures of Tom Adams in my study. If the Labour Party wants to get one of them, I can probably negotiate with you. But that highway is a mark of who the Barbados Labour Party is and what leadership generally means. Every single member of the opposition called it a white elephant. It was a waste of the taxpayers' money, and back and forth and back and forth. I don't recall who said it. I think it was Clyde who said it should have been called the Tom Adams highway. And unto this day, I cannot believe why it is possible that the Democratic Labour Party, when they come to power, can take everything that was there before and name it after somebody belonging to them. And we find it so difficult to name things that ought to be named for the person that were responsible for them. So may I don't make that mistake when you get in here. And I want to thank all of you who are here tonight and these youngsters. I would like to see you guys gel, work together, not as a 1-1, 2-2 sort of thing. Let the Labour Party be the Labour Party again. And let us bring that feeling of family back into the Labour Party, because that's what made us great.
Thank you very much, Vic Johnson. And to have the final word this evening, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you, no introduction needed, but here we go, the leader of the Barbados Labour Party, Mia Amor-Motley.
I'm not sure if that was a symbolic passing of the baton. Where to start? Sir Henry, and every other member here, Sir Louis, Billie, Sir David, Delisle, Aaron, Vic, John, Clyde, Ezra. About 6 weeks ago, I said to Jerome, as we were discussing what we would do for the 80th anniversary, we felt that in spite of the fact that we were in an election season, that we had to pause, reflect, and give thanks. And that is what this evening is about. And I believe strongly that this week was the appropriate week, because on Saturday we also celebrate the 120th anniversary of the birth of Grantley Herbert Adams. I know that I stand here only because of those of you who went before. And I wanted the rest of the team that I have the honor to lead to understand that they too stand here only because of the work of all who went before. I speak not only of those who are here or those who served in Parliament, be it in the House of Assembly or in the Senate, and who have gone. I speak of Mr. Conrad Ishmael. I speak of, for those who don't know, you see Don now, but the person who I saw when I first came to the Labour Party back in the late 80s, who lived in the Labour Party, who opened the door, who closed the door, who kept the building together, was Conrad Ishmael. I speak of people even before him, like long-haired George, and Sylvester and Berry and Slims. Let's come into Slims. People who I knew, not as a politician, but people who I knew as a young girl running about and jumping on the truck when meetings were to be held and equipment and horns were to be loaded, and I would jump on and we would pretend that we were speaking on the back of a platform and helping them load that equipment on. I remember Slims in good times and bad times. I remember when he got in trouble with hitting the car and when he didn't. And very often people didn't even know that the car had gone. So that these are the memories of the Labour Party. I remember joining the Labour Party and going in by Sylvester's house after a meeting. Within the first few months, you couldn't leave a meeting and go home. You left meetings and mixed with one another. And we didn't go to another MP's house or another candidate's house. We mixed as one. Some may argue that the first memory, for me, it is because the first memory of a political meeting for me truly was as a young girl in St. Joseph. I must have been 3 or 4 years old, and it is only now that I realize that it was the 1970 by-election of Lindsay Bolden. And I remember being in the back seat and trying to get out of the car and being told you can't come out of the car. Those are the early memories. But I felt that we had to capture this because this party is not a fly-by-night institution. This is a party of 80 years. This is a party whose tradition is strong, but more importantly, whose philosophy has been constant. This is a party that recognizes that we cannot turn around 350 years of wrong in 10 years or 20 years or 30 or 40, that this is a continuum. This is a party that set from the very beginning its commitment to deal with workers and ordinary people and to allow them to be the best that they could be, and to recognize that that could not happen without education and without people being healthy. And that could not happen without economic opportunity, because economic opportunity is about fundamentally choice, and choice is what freedom ultimately is about. This is a party that didn't wait to decide that it now wants to talk about enfranchisement. The precepts and principles of economic enfranchisement started when this party formed as a political institution in 1938, taking on the responsibility of political organization so that we could enfranchise Barbadians. And we moved into the 50s and recognized by 51 that if the ordinary person did not have the right to vote, there would be no enfranchisement ultimately, and that that right to vote could not be circumscribed by the ownership of property. This is a party that went the next step and recognized that if workers did not have that right through the establishment of the Barbados Workers' Union, and I trust and pray that our members will come out on May Day for the workers of this country next week, but that we understood that organization of workers was critical because in strength there is unity. This is a party that went beyond the simple enfranchisement of workers through unions to the passage of legislation in the 1950s. This is a party that understood that social enfranchisement, be it through housing, through education, or through health care, and hence the most aggressive social program in the 1950s undertaken by the Barbados Labour Party with public housing, with the construction of West St. Joseph, now Grantley Adams, St. Leonard's School, Parkinson Secondary, and Princess Margaret. Those 4 schools made it possible, as Sir Henry said, for in 1962 to there be a declaration that education shall be free for all in one swipe of a pen. This is a party that understood that even though Mr. Barr started the Social Security that Grantley Adams planned with the National Insurance Scheme, and that's the beauty of Barbados until this last decade, that there was a continuum in its development. That we understood that workers had a right in terms of Social Security that we needed to protect. And when Tom Adams, therefore, did what most Caribbean countries still today have not done, and established unemployment benefit insurance as a critical part of our social security scheme, we took Barbados to another place. This is a party that understood that economic enfranchisement was critical if people were to have choice. And let us remember that the clear determination by the Tom Adams cabinet to reserve for Barbadians ownership within the transport sector and ownership within the food sector was a decision that stood and enfranchised and empowered thousands of Barbadian families who without that would not have had a start in this country, and who today are only now left to the elements because of the World Trade Organization and the commitment by the Democratic Labour Party government by David Thompson in the early 1990s without the appropriate reservations to protect us as we joined the WTO. This is a party that saw to it that hundreds of years of exploitation would be corrected with what I think all of us in this room agree, that after the right to vote, the most revolutionary piece of legislation in the Americas from Alaska to Chile, land redistribution without shouting it from the mountaintops, but has led to thousands of families changing their circumstances with the Tenantry's Freehold Purchase Act. We are not here by accident.
Wow.
And when, therefore, we speak in the covenant of hope about empowerment and enfranchisement, ours is a journey that continues. Ours is a journey that continued in the 1990s and the early 2000s when we laid the framework under Owen Arthur for a new economy. And when we did it with respect to the establishment of the Fair Trading Commission, when we did it with respect to the Urban Tenantries Freehold Act, making sure that people in urban tenantries would not be left out, a policy which regrettably has been put on pause, Jeffrey, for the majority of the last decade. This is a party whose mission remains constant and relevant. And regrettably, we have had a lost decade. I thank all of you, and Trevor is absolutely correct, that we need formally to establish a mechanism, because if this country had the benefit of, even among the Dems that were there, of their wisdom in the last decade, I trust and pray that we would not have seen what has happened happen. We are too small to rely on too few people to lead us. And the message coming out of tonight has to be that all of us are in this together. And I say every time, many hands make light work. I take this opportunity to speak to one matter. And I want to, in doing so, thank Dame Billie. I have asked Dame Billie to formally join this campaign. It has meant that there are some things that I need her to do over the course of the next few weeks for us. The wind may be in our sail, but we need now to bring the boat safely into harbor. And I make no apologies for saying I will not take any chances with the lives and aspirations of the people of Barbados in so doing. I've therefore asked her to formally join this campaign because no one can replace her in the campaign, but I can find someone to do her work at the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And therefore I want to thank her for her service as Deputy Chairman of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. I believe she has formally advised Her Excellency Dame Sandra Mason that she has demitted her office as of Monday as Deputy Chairman of that commission. And let me remind you, there are others who feel that it is okay to hold a position and play partisan politics. That is not the BLP way. And once that decision has been made for her to join me in the campaign, that position became vacant, and I've advised the Prime Minister formally that I would like him to appoint Mr. Leslie Haynes, Queen's Counsel, as Deputy Chair to replace Dame Billie. I appoint the Prime Minister, who will then advise the Governor General. But I say that because, as I said, I'm not taking anything for granted. And none of you must. Because what lies at stake is too much. The stability of this country is at risk. And we have a duty to all who went before, who made it possible for us to stand here, and all who will come after. And I trust and pray that all who are hearing our voices understand that in this going down, which I suspect we will hear very shortly because the Prime Minister is literally run out of time. Whatever time he calls it now, it has to be effectively before the end of May. So within the next 4 to 5 weeks, we shall be going to a poll of, without a doubt. That in this going down, we need each and every one of you, from the elders to the youngsters, to the ones who are carrying the weight, to the rank and file, to the ones who are not of the Labour Party. But this one, tonight I ask you, in the family and the bosom of the Labour Party, this one has to be for Barbados. And if you see me send that clarion call, it is because, as you heard tonight, we come from a tradition where we have never allowed tribalism to get into the way of what is good for Barbados. I thank Billie and David for reminding us of those examples in the provision of services that we did across Barbados from the 50s to the 70s, without reference to where people represented. Certainly when I was in a cabinet, I know that the concrete road program started in St. Lucie, Peter, when we did not have an MP in St. Lucie. I thank John for reminding us of the position of Sir Harold, who would not put Barbados' future at risk. And I say to all of the members of this Labour Party that in order for us to be able to move forward in a country that we recognize, and in one that will bring back prosperity and hope to our children and our grandchildren, then this election must be for Barbados. I ask you to join me in that crusade, because once we get it right, then with a rising tide, all shall prosper. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart. There will be a documentary on the 80 years of the Barbados Labour Party. We've asked for that to be commissioned. I'm sure that some of these moments tonight will be captured, and many of you in here will be asked after the election, because we have some business to do first, that there will be other events over the course of the next 10 months until March 31st next year to celebrate the 80 years. And I trust and pray that we will do so recognizing that we come from a proud lineage. We have a proud heritage, but we have equally to recognize that our mission is not yet accomplished. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Ms. Motley, leader of the Barbados Labour Party. Before we close, I'd also like to, by way of giving a very brief vote of thanks, say that we came to this venue yesterday after looking at another one, and therefore in 24 hours a small team of people have been able to pull this off and put it together. And therefore I'd like to acknowledge the really, really hard work of Charles Jung. He's at the back of the room. You would have seen him back and forth all night. And his team, Chris Cook-Johnson, Ricky Redmond, and Gregory Hunt. Of course, from the Labour Party office, Pat Paris, and the support of our General Secretary, Dr. Jerome Walcott. Thank you very much. And last but by no means least, the management and staff of the Radisson Aquatica, in particular Jazz Goddard, who immediately said yes and has made every single thing possible. And finally, I'd like us all to stand to say thank you to this amazing group of elders, not elderly by any stretch of the imagination, elders who has given us not just food for thought, but amazing inspiration and motivation to go forward, whether as a candidate or an average Barbadian, to do the best, not only for ourselves and for our community, but for our country. Thank you so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to just ask all of the candidates to come forward. I think that they've asked for a photograph to be done before we leave this room. So there are candidates right there. I see you in the back. Ronald, Joe Atherley, Ryan, Marsha, all of you. Sandra, I see you. Let's come forward, please.
We're setting up. We're setting up. We're setting up.